The current state of modern SpongeBob is a strange case. Initially, it seemed like the show had been restored to its former glory after several terrible seasons. But upon closer inspection, it's become pretty clear that the series has become more soulless and corporate. It still doesn't have the same wit and incredible writing that made the first 3 seasons so iconic. Plus, fan pandering is used as a cheap substitute for that.
Ah, come on, Doc. It's just my leg!
Hello, Fred. Your leg looks great. Nosferatu!
And whereas the first 2 post-movie seasons had lightless animation and dull and muted colors, the most recent episodes have the opposite problem. While it may be more visually appealing by being brighter and more colorful, and the animation is fluid. The issue, however, is that every second there's hyper-exaggeration, which feels distracting and unnecessary. While I can give praise to the animators for all the work and effort that must go into this, I don't think the current showrunners understand that this type of exaggeration works best when it's seldomly used, rather than having it happen constantly. But of course, the biggest indicator that SpongeBob is going full corporate are the recent spin-offs. From the moment that they were revealed, there was plenty of backlash from fans, as allegedly, the creator of SpongeBob SquarePants, Steven Hillenburg, was completely against the idea of the show getting spin-offs. So it appeared extremely disrespectful on Nickelodeon's part to start greenlighting these shows just a few years after his death. Although supposedly, Steven was already aware of these spin-offs before he died, according to Nickelodeon. However, there hasn't been any concrete confirmation of this claim. But regardless of what the truth is, it's pretty clear that these spin-offs were made solely to capitalize on SpongeBob's success. And as a result, we're led with pointless extensions to the SpongeBob universe. Not helping is the fact that these shows are confirmed to be 100% canon to the main series, as the characters who were introduced in both shows are now making regular appearances in it. Well, I guess there's no more delaying the inevitable. It is time to take a look at these spin-offs, starting with Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Under Years.
I'm hitting the trail.
What we have here is a show that ages down the cast of SpongeBob and puts them in a summer camp setting, and being the first of these spin-offs to be announced, it received the full brunt of the backlash from the fans who are mad at Nickelodeon for disrespecting Steven Hillenburg's wishes. The 2020 SpongeBob movie, Sponge on the Run, was used to introduce the concept of the series, by having a needlessly long scene of the characters talking about their memories at Camp Coral, only for the actual series to completely contradict those flashbacks, such as Mr. Krabs being the head of the camp in the show instead of the cook as stated in the movie. The show doesn't even use the same character designs from the flashbacks in that movie. And there's also the fact that Camp Coral blatantly contradicts the fact that SpongeBob didn't meet Mr. Krabs and Sandy until he was an adult, as his first encounters with them were seen in the main series episodes. While SpongeBob never had strict continuity, this isn't something that can easily be ignored. The show gives a flimsy and contrived explanation for this. That being, Sandy creating a device that allows her to communicate with her past self in order to get her to come to Camp Coral and meet SpongeBob when they're both kids.
Good work, little Sandy. I knew sending you to Camp Coral was the right thing to do.
The reasoning for this doesn't even make a lick of sense, as apparently, SpongeBob discovers the Krabby Patty formula by accident, while working in Plankton's kitchen, but doesn't remember how he did it. So Kid Sandy is tasked with preventing Plankton from finding out the recipe, so that it can be rediscovered by Mr. Krabs later on. But in the original timeline of the main series, where SpongeBob and Sandy meet as adults, Mr. Krabs has the formula, and Plankton doesn't have his hands on it. So what exactly was the reason Sandy had to alter the past? This is just a shoehorned way to explain a blatant continuity error, but it was so poorly thought out that it just ends up creating more questions than it answers. So right off the bat, Camp Coral has a lot going against it, but how is the actual show? It's bad. Like, really bad. The most noticeable issue is the fact that it uses CGI animation. Now, while Sponge on the Run did show that SpongeBob can work with CGI animation, after all, that was the only good thing about that dumpster fire of a movie. However, that movie had the budget to have the details and stylization to capture the feel of the series. But since Camp Coral is a TV show, it obviously has a significantly smaller budget than Sponge on the Run, resulting in more basic and bland character models and backgrounds. Now looking at certain stills, the show doesn't look too bad, as there's at least some decent shading and lighting. But the more you actually watch the show, the pitfalls in the animation become significantly clearer. The backgrounds look empty, and the character designs are too simplistic due to the lack of details in the visuals. The visual gags range from underwhelming at best, and horrifically uncanny at worst. Case in point, the scene where SpongeBob's whole body swells off from jellyfish stings.
Mr. Tentacles, it was not a cave. It was a jellyfish hive.
As for the animation itself, there's actually a good effort on the part of the animators, as they try to capture the style and exaggeration of the main series. But unfortunately, due to the awful business practices of the higher-ups of Nickelodeon, who prioritize profit over quality, the animators are not given enough time to execute the animation properly, resulting in it falling flat. But it's not just the animation in Camp Coral that sucks, but also the characters and writing. The entire cast of the show are nothing but one-dimensional, vandalized caricatures of the main series counterparts. The humor in Camp Coral is a lot more childish than it is in SpongeBob SquarePants, relying way more on simplistic stupidity without any real wit. Not to mention the basic slapstick that has zero weight and impact along with the gross out. To put it simply, Camp Coral is not only unfunny, but it's also extremely boring. The plots in each episode have such a generic execution, and are filled with holes. Like the episode where Plankton plans to make a doomsday pie, but keeps messing it up due to it being the camp's comedy night outside of his kitchen, and the frequent bursts of laughter distracts him. But like, what's stopping him from baking the pie another time? And there's also the episode where SpongeBob, Patrick, and Sandy find a young sea squatch, but then they accidentally bring it back to the camp thinking it's Patrick because he's dressed like one, and don't realize the mistake until the climax. But here's the thing, while I can imagine SpongeBob being this stupid, how did Sandy make the same mistake when she's supposed to be the smart one of the group? Overall, Camp Coral is a prime example of a spin-off made solely to capitalize on the popularity of a show, with not enough time or resources given to make it stand out as a worthwhile show on its own or as an extension to the SpongeBob universe. But of course, Camp Coral isn't the only spin-off show that Nickelodeon used to milk off SpongeBob. Case in point, the Patrick Star Show.
This is my show!
What we have here is your typical case of a spin-off series starring a popular supporting character from the main show. Although, surprisingly, its failure is actually kind of unfortunate, because believe it or not, there was actually a spark of potential in this show. Anyway, the Patrick Star Show stars, you guessed it, Patrick Star. The series revolves around him as he hosts his own show from home, while dealing with the various crazy antics that come his way. Such as getting a job, trying to find a remote that fell through the crack of the couch, which leads to a crazy underground adventure, or the time that Patrick and his grandpa are at a standstill on the stairs, which leads to a falling war as they refuse to let the other person pass. There are also various other segments, such as a stop-motion animated one where Plankton, Patrick, and SpongeBob are portrayed as Frankenstein characters. We're also introduced to his family, such as his parents, Cecile and Bunny, his adopted sister, Squidina, and his grandfather, who's creatively named Grandpat. Sure, this definitely retcons his original parents and sister from the main series, but since they were barely in it, these changes are easy to overlook. Unfortunately, this show's cast isn't particularly great. This version of Patrick Star isn't strong enough in terms of character to be a protagonist who can carry a whole show on his own. Like with Camp Coral, we're dealing with a fragilized version of the character, who's ridden with the idea that the stupider he acts, the funnier he becomes, which is just straight up wrong. As for his parents, they're written to be just as dumb as Patrick, to the point where they're basically just clones of him, which results in neither of them standing out. Squidina, on the other hand, was a decent attempt at a straight man to bounce off of Patrick, being the manager of his show, all while retaining a childlike personality. Grandpa almost works as a grouchy grandparent, who sometimes acts as an antagonist towards Patrick, while other times offering his wisdom, albeit in an odd way. The other characters from the main series, such as SpongeBob and Squidward, also make regular appearances in this show, which kind of undermines the idea of this being a spin-off series, especially when there are episodes of Patrick and SpongeBob getting into wacky situations, exactly like they did in the main series. However, I will admit that I was nowhere near as bored watching this show as I was with Camp Coral. There's plenty of creative visuals and inventive details in the background that caught my attention. The random and out there nature of the plots in each episode was certainly more interesting than the dull execution of generic stories in Camp Coral. Heck, there were even a couple moments that got a chuckle out of me. Unfortunately, there is one area that causes the whole series to fall flat, that being the writing, which is ultimately the show's undoing. There weren't any jokes that were especially hilarious or clever, and the weak writing holds back the creativity that the show is aiming for back immensely. As a result, we're left with another mediocre spin-off, which is disappointing, because all the pieces were there for a fun show. Ultimately, the biggest fault for both Camp Coral and the Patrick Star Show is the writing. However, the writers of both of these shows are actually not at fault for this. It's Nickelodeon Nickelodeon's business practices are the blame for the shortcomings of these shows. Because you see, SpongeBob SquarePants, Camp Coral, and The Patrick Star Show all have mostly the same writing teams, and suddenly, it all makes sense as to why these shows lack creativity and clever humor, as well as why they all blend together, despite each of them trying to go for their own distinct style. Can you honestly blame the writing teams for struggling to put their best foot forward with this kind of unfair workload? A better way to go about this would be to hire new writers, while already having one or two from the main series in order to retain the spirit of SpongeBob. Who knows, perhaps this will help each show to improve immensely. But it seems that Nickelodeon will rather make as many shows as possible without paying the extra money, which would inevitably lead to mediocrity. And I think that just about wraps up my video on the SpongeBob spin-offs. If you enjoyed it, then be sure to give this video a like, comment, and share. Also, subscribe to my channel and hit the bell for notifications. Also, if you're interested in supporting this channel, then be sure to head over to my Patreon. Well, I got nothing else to say, so see ya!